are so excited to have you all here at this dedication ceremony for our mural. The last few weeks have been an incredible journey, a journey of creativity, of coming together, of reflecting, and of telling the kinds of stories we too often do not like to tell. If we want to own our shadows, it is important for us to provide narratives so we can reflect, we can remember, and we can together work on a better future, the sort of future that Martin Luther King dreamed about when he talked about the beloved community. We would not be here today if it wasn't for these two amazing artists who have been working here the last few weeks to create this marvel in front of you. Let me introduce them both to you. On one hand, you have a former art professor from VSU, Taylor Shaw. And then you have one of his favorite students, Shay Clayton. I would also like to welcome not just all of you in general. You're part of a human family that is trying to work this out, how we're going to be able to move forward as a society. I would also like to recognize those who have traveled all the way down from Atlanta, members of the Society of St. Anna the Prophet. Thank you for coming. We also have here members of the Public Advisory Council, Public Art Advisory Council, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission. And then we have, of course, also members of the City Council or City Government. We have Mayor James Scott Matheson right here with us. We have Vivian Cody with us, one of our City Council members. And there may be others in the audience that I cannot see right now. I do apologize if I do not name you specifically. But we're happy to see all of you celebrating this mural. And the mural couldn't come at a better time. As an educator, I'm appalled about some of the developments that we have experienced the last few years, even the last few months. Books are being banned, vocabulary is being banned. We cannot talk about the things we ought to talk about because some people, and I have been one of them at some point, are afraid to look inside, to figure out who we are as human beings, and all of us as human beings have a dark side. And we have to recognize that. Just as joy and sorrow are sisters or siblings in many ways, the dark side and the bright side are brothers and sisters, make you who you are. I don't want to talk any much longer, to be honest, because it's getting hot out here, and I'm not from around here, as you can tell. And the barbecue section is already starting over there and will eventually expand to over in this direction. So it is my pleasure to be here today to represent Christ the King Episcopal Church, a church that has been the spiritual home of my family for more than 20 years, a church that would not exist if it wasn't for the late Father Stan White, and a church that is sometimes a thorn in the side of some of our local officials too, but it's part of our job as well. We need to challenge each other, and we're doing this as human beings, and we are doing this with the idea of forgiveness and learning how to listen and learning how to maybe share stories. Having said enough, I would like to now hand over the microphone to our beautiful Archdeacon, Yvette Owens, and would you please take the stage? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just wanted to tell you a little bit about Christ the King. 20 years ago, we moved from North Valdosta Road to Central Avenue. Father Stan had a dream for Christ the King to be the center of downtown, where people could come together to worship, go to Hildegard's for music, art, and even a sandwich. Over these years, we fed Emory medical staff who came and gave free health care to migrant workers, free English classes on Saturdays, and we did many other services. Even though we are no longer centralized in the heart, we are still downtown, we are still growing, and we're still trying to live up, and will continue to live up to Father Stan's dream. Thank you. I would now like to give the microphone to our Bishop Frank Loeb.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming here today. You know, the stories that we tell and the stories that we fail to tell say a lot about a community, right? And putting forward a magnificent piece of art like this, it presents to future generations, to our children and grandchildren, images that they need to ask about and that we need to tell about, right? So that you see faces that you might not see otherwise and ask, who is this woman? Who is this man? Who is this? What's the story behind this tree, Mama? And then when you get to tell those stories, you bring out things that you might not want to tell otherwise but need to be told. And when I look at the words over here, look for the helpers, we know those to come from Fred Rogers, a wonderful, wonderful presence on television, right? And he talked about times when he was asked to speak to tragedy in the country as assassinations were occurring, larger movements were happening. And how do you speak to children about that? And in telling parents how to speak to their children, what he remembered was how his mother had spoken to him. And he said that as a child, his mother would tell him when things were distressing and there was more to take in and it seemed like everything was bad. She said, Fred, look for the helpers. Look for them. They're always there. There's always caring people. There's always people around looking to do something. And then, of course, he became one of those helpers. A caring person who transformed television. He saw the ability for that. And this is the thing. For this town, for the children, this is a sign of look for the helpers, and these are some of the helpers who we have seen. From Deaconess Anna Alexander, who lifted up her community. People who would walk great distances barefoot to attend school, and she would make sure they had that, and then that they had trade school and university educations after that. People who are better known, Malcolm X and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., people who should be known, like Marsha Johnson. People in the community whose names we need to know, right? But the thing is, for those of us who are adults, what we are supposed to remember is not that we are to look for the helpers. We are to be the helpers we want our children and grandchildren to see. Because this real story of Mary Turner, so painful. Her husband Hayes killed in an act of terrorism unlike anything we'd seen in an area where we have seen so much in 1918, mob violence. Taking her husband, she had the audacity to stand up against it. And then what happened to her is too heinous to name right now, but it was just the worst of mob violence, murder, captured in a way that shows that the life that was taken away and the life that's still possible if we tell these stories and learn from them. Where were the helpers for Ahmaud Arbery and for Mary Turner and for Hayes? It's a challenge to us as adults to be the helpers when it comes at a cost to us. Because being the helper when it's easy doesn't matter. Being the helper when everyone is standing against you is what matters. So what I want to name is This Art Matters, because it stands as a challenge to educate future generations and a challenge to be that change we want to point them to. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Catherine Meeks, who came all the way from Atlanta, and I'm going to hand over the microphone.
Thank you, Michael. Michael makes that sound so like such a big deal, and I actually got on an airplane and they brought me here. You know, like, it's not like if there was a mule in a wagon and they had to drive all night to get here. My ancestors left at daybreak this morning coming here, so they get more credit than I do. But I am almost to the point of not being able to speak in the midst of this moment, because I think that there's so much that we don't need to let get lost here today. We sit here in the middle of a time when people think that any thing you choose to make up about history will be good enough as long as you don't have to deal with the truth. And we have to find ways to stand against that. And so I think the ways to stand against it are to have courage and vision and to be willing to make a public witness every day, every minute of our lives. It is very easy to go downtown, go out somewhere and find the person who needs a lunch or needs a jacket, and you give that to them because you believe that everybody ought to have a chance to have what they need. It is a different thing to put yourself on record as being a witness against inequality, injustice, racism, sexism, and all of those other isms that separate us as a human family. And what I see this church doing today is putting itself in the public square as a witness. And what I want all of us to do is to ask ourselves, how do I witness for what is right, for what is the call, particularly those of us who claim to be following Jesus? I am appalled, as I'm sure you are, at people who can claim out of one side of their mouth they follow Jesus, and out of the other side they can hang Mary Turner. We live with that dichotomous reality historically, and we can't change it. And the folks who are trying to change it are just wrong. And I like to leave space for difference. I like to leave space for people to disagree with me, but you don't get to have your own set of facts. There's some things that are true, and no matter what you think about them, no matter how you feel about them, no matter how they make you feel, it's still true. And we are in the midst of a cultural set of energy systems that want to say, if I don't like it, it's not true. That is living like an idiot. And we have plenty of idiocy happening right now in our country, in our midst, in this city, and in our churches and everywhere. And we each have to find what is the loving, kind way to stand against that idiocy so that it keeps on getting diffused. I believe that life is about a series of energetic systems. And every time you stand up as a public witness like this against the idiot cloud, you dethrone, you destabilize the negative energy. And you may not be able to see what your little part was, but your part matters. And there's too much thinking, my little bit, so little it doesn't matter. It matters. When you stand up for truth, when you stand up for right, when you stand up for good, when you make a public witness, when you are courageous, when you have vision, when you keep trusting that there is something bigger than the moment and something better than preserving your own idea of yourself, then it matters. So, when I first heard about this, that this mural was being done, I was so ecstatic. I've been doing the work of trying to help people, calling it dismantling racism, but really trying to help people be more human, because that's really what it boils down to. Learning how to be a better human being and making space for everybody on the planet to do the same thing is what that work really is. And getting rid of racism is one piece of what the work is. But for more than 50 years now, I have been doing this work, and I will be doing it until I die. I know that, because it's not going away. But this is one of the most beautiful and powerful things I've heard coming from the Episcopal Communion for a while. And I'm ready now to challenge the whole church to find ways to make a public witness that is ongoing, so that you don't get to be all about liberation when you're inside your church house, and then when you sit in a room full of white people that are racist, you keep your mouth shut. Because if they know you go to this church, then they know you should be opening your mouth. Because you already put a public statement here that says, this is what we are about. I don't know if Christ the King parishioners understand what a powerful gift you give today to your sisters and brothers that are trying to hide under the bed. You are saying, put yourself in the public square as a witness bearer. What does it mean to bear witness today for me, for you? And we don't, I don't believe in dog and pony shows, and people know how impatient I am with stuff that we do for window dressing, because it's just ridiculous, a lot of what we do. Today has got to be about more than us sitting here celebrating some beautiful painting on a wall. It's got to be about how are we going to make this world a place that can sustain us as human beings, because we are trying to learn better how to live together. We're going to destroy the earth with our foolish efforts to destroy one another. So, courage. Thank you, Christ the King. Leaders, for taking this on. Thank you, Taylor. And I don't know, your little head's too little, Shay, to have all of this in it. But I'm so grateful for that head you've got. And I can't wait to get to know you better and to watch what you do. And Taylor, as a professor, you must be incredibly proud to have had a student like that, and to have a student like that. Courage. It took courage to keep going, to talk to people, to convince people. And vision and courage really go together, because if you don't have courage, you won't have any vision. Because you got to stay on a little track that's safe. There is no time now to be hedging our bet to be safe. It is time to decide what we really believe, and to decide if we believe it enough to stand up for it. And then how can you be a public witness and not always have to be running your mouth? Because so much of what we say doesn't really mean anything when it gets down to what we have to do. So what I'm trying to learn, not to talk about things I don't believe in, and not to proclaim things I'm not willing to do. I can take responsibility for myself. If I want to be loving and kind, if I want to talk about beloved community and love, we need to remove those words from our vocabularies until we decide that we really mean them. And when we do really mean them, the world will start to see the light of God in a different way. So I was up half the night trying to think about how to be clear, concise, and quick. I have missed the point on being quick. But I hope that I have been clear and concise. And they are, Christ the King, people are generous enough to allow me to give them the gift of being with them as preacher in the morning. And I'll try to, again, to be clear, concise, and pretty quick. But the house is on fire. And we've got to quit debating about fire extinguishers. We've got to get with it. This mural is getting with it. What can you do in wherever you are, and individually and collectively, to be a public witness to a better way to be, and to these amazing folks on this wall, and that could be on many walls, who were willing to give their lives so we could be here together as free people. I hope you'll be really troubled until you can come up with good answers for yourselves. I hope we will all be disrupted until we have created a more sustainable world, where little folks like those sitting down there in these little chairs don't have to be talking about this stuff someday in their lives. God bless you.